The question was, why does the full moon affect my sleep and my dreams? Well, if you do some research on this, they try to tell you that it doesn't. They try to tell you there's no evidence that suggests blah 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 blah. You get a lot of cops and a lot of medical profession people who work in hospitals. They're like, yeah, definitely during the full moon, yeah, everything is obvious. Um, you think the body is 75 to 90% water. I think it's 75% water, and the moon affects the tide, so it definitely affects something in us. Sure. Women ovulate with the moon. Well, women don't really ovulate with the moon; they ovulate with other women. Yeah, try to live with a woman and try to keep track of where her cycle is. It has nothing to do with the moon. Doesn't really affect it. It goes in and out of sync with it, and um, does the full moon affect your dreams? Well, they don't really like you thinking that there's anything up with the moon. They really don't. And you try to get into the moon landing hoax, that doesn't work out for you very well either. I believe the moon isn't really what you think it is. The moon looks the same all the time to us. They try to tell you that it just moves, it rotates at the same speed that it cycles at. So we will never see that side of the moon. That's convenient. You only see one side of it. It always looks the same to us. It's almost like it's a back in the day, the ancients believed that the stars and the sun were really just hanging from a really high ceiling a couple miles up. And you invent the telescope and you look out there and you're like, oh, well, it's not like that. I mean, these things really are far. What if light behaves differently at far distances? What if the speed of light changes so that the farther you look, it appears to be even farther than it really is? Because after like so much of a distance, light kind of anyway. You ever notice that the moon appears to be the same size as the sun from our perspective? Isn't that convenient? That's pretty weird. I mean, the sun is 93 million miles away, and the moon is, what is it, like 250,000 kilometers, something like that? 100,000 kilometers, I don't know. But these two objects, very different in size. One of them's really far away, one of them's really close, and just by good luck, they appear to be the same size, so that the eclipse works out. I mean, that's really good luck. That's kind of strange. Almost as strange as life being able to happen here. You know how the moon began? They say something hit the earth, and all these pieces broke off, and instead of assembling into rings, everything just came together and formed one satellite, and we've had that since then, and that's the moon. They go to the moon. Well, they say they've gone to the moon, and they got moon rock. They have some rocks, and they're telling us it came from the moon. And there's some weird stuff in there. There's two elements that are not naturally found. One of them is byproduct of uranium splitting. One of them is a byproduct of creating plutonium. Lots of weird stuff. Makes you think about aliens. You ever hear hollow moon theory? Hollow moon theory is pretty cool. They're saying that what we see as the moon is really just a big shell, and inside the moon are aliens. Or that the moon is really actually like a spaceship, like it was like created by some alien race, and that's how they got here. I don't know. That's pretty nuts. But the tides. The thing with the tides, I'm getting back to that. The tides that you see in the oceans, that's pretty drastic, isn't it? The tides that you see in the Great Lakes are only like 2 inches of a difference. So the tides that affect the body, all the water moving around in your body, that's got to be microscopic. But we have what is it, 30 trillion cells or 30 trillion neurons in the brain or something like that. I think a microscopic difference could have an effect psychologically. I still don't really believe that the moon is what we think it is, though. How do you prove this? To convince me, here's my challenge to you. Get a telescope. Get an ordinary telescope. Point it at the moon and find that spot where the American astronauts put that flag. Get to the point where you can actually see that in the telescope and invite me over. And I'm going to look in your telescope, and if I can see with my own eyes that there is a flag on that thing up there, then I'll completely believe that we landed on the moon and the moon is real and all that. But for now, I don't really know. I mean, it's everything you think you know about the moon has been handed to you by people who you might not really know. And what if the people who work for NASA, what if they were like tricked, like what if they put them into some kind of like crazy thing where they show them holograms and hallucination, they're hallucinating stuff and there's holograms and there's so then they come back and they honestly believe that they saw what they saw or whatever. What if all those images from space aren't real? It's possible. You don't really know. So I guess the way that we would have to find out is we would have to send one of us to the moon or go through the telescope and see that flag. I think the moon is strange because we only see that one side. It just so happens to rotate at the same time that wouldn't that get off at some point or whatever? It appears to be the same size as the sun because of the distance and all that. That just works out perfectly. There's another thing saying that like a planet of our size, if it were to have satellites, they would be way smaller, like 30, 50 miles. The moon is like over 2,000 miles big. The moon's bigger than Pluto. Like we're almost at double planets here. And the other thing is, if the moon was created by something smashing into Earth and flying out into space and then getting back together to create the moon, wouldn't the composition of the moon's surface be extremely similar to the kind of stuff you find on Earth? Like, wouldn't we have the same elements up there that we would down here? Wouldn't we have the same kind of rock and stone and sand and, whatever else we have down here? That's another thing to think about. That's kind of strange. So, it's hard to talk about the moon. To answer your question, the question was, why does the full moon affect my sleep and my dreams? Because that's what it was designed to do.